What if the most powerful institution in America was not the presidency, nor the Congress, but an entity that operates in the shadows, accountable to no one? What if this institution, which holds the fate of your money, your savings, and your future in its hands, was not a branch of the government at all, but a private club of the world's wealthiest bankers? This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the story of the Federal Reserve. It's a story that begins not in the halls of Washington, D.C., but on a secluded private island under the cover of darkness. It is the secret history of how a private bank took over America's money. The year is 1910. America is a nation on edge. A devastating financial panic in 1907 had wiped out fortunes and shattered public trust in the banking system. The public was angry, demanding reform and an end to the stranglehold of Wall Street titans like J.P. Morgan. The word on everyone's lips was monopoly, and they wanted it broken. It was in this climate of suspicion that a strange and secret expedition was arranged. In the dead of a November night, a single sealed train car sat waiting at a New Jersey station. One by one, some of the most powerful men in the world arrived, their identities carefully concealed. They were told to come alone, to avoid reporters, and to refer to each other only by their first names to prevent the train staff from discovering who they were. The host of this clandestine gathering was Senator Nelson Aldrich, a formidable political figure, and crucially, the father-in-law of John D. Rockefeller, Jr. With him were men who represented an estimated 1/4 of the entire world's wealth. There was Abraham Piatt Andrew, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury; Frank Vanderlip, the President of the National City Bank of New York, J.P. Morgan's premier institution; Henry Davison, a senior partner at J.P. Morgan and Company; Charles Norton, President of Morgan's First National Bank of New York; and Benjamin Strong, another Morgan lieutenant. But the most important figure, the intellectual architect of the plan, was Paul Warburg, a German immigrant. He was a partner in Kuhn, Loeb and Company, a representative of the Rothschild banking dynasty in England and France. Warburg understood the European model of central banking better than anyone, a model that concentrated financial power in the hands of a select few. Their destination was Jekyll Island, a luxurious, privately owned retreat off the coast of Georgia. For 9 days, these men hunted, dined, and most importantly, plotted. Their mission, presented to the public as a simple duck hunting trip, was to write a piece of legislation that would fundamentally change the American financial system forever. They were drafting the blueprint for a central bank. But their goal was not to serve the public interest. Their goal was to protect their own. They wanted to create a system that would stop future panics, yes, but on their terms. A system that would privatize profit, socialize loss, and give them the ultimate power, the power to create money itself. The plan they hatched on that island would later become, with a few cosmetic changes, the Federal Reserve Act. In 1913, their plan became reality. The Federal Reserve Act was cleverly passed into law just 2 days before Christmas, when much of Congress was already home for the holidays. It was presented to the American people as a way to stabilize the economy and control the currency, placing it in the hands of impartial experts. This was the first great deception. The Federal Reserve is not federal. It has no reserves, and it is not a government bank. It is a cartel of private banks, owned by the very institutions it is supposed to regulate. The 12 regional Federal Reserve banks are private corporations, and their shares are owned by the private commercial banks in their district. This is the bedrock of the entire system. So how does it work? How does this private entity control the nation's money? The mechanism is both simple and diabolical. When the U.S. government needs more money than it can raise through taxes to fund a war, finance a new program, or bail out a failing industry, it doesn't ask the Fed for a loan in the traditional sense. Instead, the Treasury Department issues an IOU, a government bond. The Federal Reserve then buys that bond. But where does the Fed get the money to buy it? It invents it. It creates it, literally out of thin air, with a simple accounting entry. New money, or Federal Reserve notes, is created on a computer screen and deposited into the government's account. In return, the government bond, the taxpayers promise to pay back that money, plus interest, sits on the Fed's balance sheet. Think about that. A private bank creates money from nothing, lends it to the government, and then charges the American taxpayer interest on it. Every single dollar in your pocket is essentially a loan from this private banking cartel. This power is near infinite. It allowed America to finance its entry into World War I just a few years after the Fed's creation. It funded the massive deficits of World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. Politicians discovered a magic money tree. They no longer needed to ask citizens for unpopular tax hikes. They could simply borrow from the future, with the Fed as their willing enabler. But this printed money has a hidden cost. The more dollars are created, the less each existing dollar is worth. This is inflation. It is not a natural economic phenomenon. It is a direct consequence of a debased currency. Inflation is a stealth tax, silently eating away at your savings and your wages, transferring wealth from the working class to the financial class who receive the new money first. With this immense power, the Federal Reserve didn't just manage the economy, it began to create it, shaping booms and busts to its own advantage. The historical record is a crime scene. Look at the Roaring Twenties. The Fed pumped easy credit into the system, creating a massive stock market bubble. Everyone felt rich, but it was an illusion built on debt. Then, in 1929, the Fed suddenly tightened the money supply, pulling the rug out from under the entire market. The ensuing crash and the Great Depression was not a simple market failure. It was an engineered demolition. As thousands of smaller regional banks went bankrupt, the architects of the system, the big Wall Street players, were able to consolidate their power, buying up competitors and assets for pennies on the dollar. Fast forward to 2008. For years, the Fed under Alan Greenspan had kept interest rates artificially low, fueling the largest housing bubble in history. Banks, incentivized by this easy money, engaged in reckless lending, creating toxic financial products called mortgage-backed securities. When the bubble inevitably burst, the system froze. Lehman Brothers collapsed. The world stood on the brink of financial Armageddon. And who came to the rescue? The Federal Reserve. Led by Ben Bernanke, it unleashed trillions of dollars in bailouts. But this money didn't go to the homeowners facing foreclosure or the workers who lost their jobs. It went to the very same too-big-to-fail banks that had caused the crisis. It was the ultimate demonstration of the Jekyll Island plan. Privatize the gains, but socialize the losses onto the backs of the taxpayers. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and their peers didn't just survive, they grew larger and more powerful than ever before. And then came 2020. In response to the global pandemic, the Federal Reserve went into overdrive. In a single year, it created more money than in the first century of its existence. Trillions upon trillions of digital dollars flooded the system through quantitative easing. The consequences are now all around us. The highest inflation in 40 years, soaring asset prices that benefit the wealthy, and a deepening divide between Wall Street and Main Street. Each crisis, from 1929 to 2008 to today, has become an excuse for the Fed to expand its power and control. The evidence is overwhelming. The Federal Reserve is not an impartial government agency working for the public good. It is a powerful banking cartel designed by bankers for bankers. It is a puppeteer pulling the strings of our economy, financing a government that has become addicted to debt and presiding over a system that systematically transfers wealth from the middle class to the financial elite. Its founders, J.P. Morgan, Paul Warburg, the Rockefellers, are long gone, but their creation endures, more powerful than they could ever have dreamed. They didn't just create a bank, they created a fourth branch of government, one that is unelected, unaccountable, and armed with the most dangerous power of all, the ability to counterfeit the nation's currency legally. To understand the Federal Reserve is to understand how the world really works. It is to realize that the most important battles are not fought on battlefields, but in boardrooms and on balance sheets. The next time you hear a politician promise a new program, ask yourself, who will pay for it? The next time you see the stock market soar while your grocery bill doubles, ask yourself, who is benefiting? Don't just get angry, get educated. Question where your money comes from. Look beyond the headlines and see the unseen hand guiding our financial destiny. Because freedom cannot exist without economic freedom. And you cannot be free until you understand who truly controls your money.